ReliaQuest Mental Performance coaches Dr. Nicole Detling and Derin McMains interview top performers across multiple industries to unpack the strategies and the mindset they use to get the job done. Welcome to No Show Dogs, powered by ReliaQuest. Hey, welcome back to the No Show Dogs podcast, powered by ReliaQuest. My name's Derin McMains, and I'm alongside one of our mental performance coaches here at ReliaQuest, Dr. Nicole Detling. Doc, what's up?
Hey, having a great day today. Really looking forward to this. I mean, we're interviewing in person. We don't get to do that
right?
very often.
I know.
That's fun.
What was it? A couple months ago, we got to do our Olympic tour in Park City, which was a lot of fun. And so now here we are in Tampa, and the guest we have today, it's a blockbuster.
Right?
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
You
Absolutely.
Like that?
Yeah.
Josh Cox is here. Josh, what's up, man? I'm not going to get to your bio yet. I just want to say what's up. How are you?
Good, real good.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it. First podcast ever. I've listened to a few, but the first time sitting in the seat, so pretty interesting to be a part of it.
You're starting with the bar high.
Yeah,
what you're saying.
right.
Yeah.
No show dogs. Here we
That's
go.
right.
Let's go. Hey, well, I want to get right to his bio because we're just so grateful that you're here, right? Grateful for all that you've done for our country, right? One, and then just grateful that you're going to share some of that hard-earned wisdom with us today. And so I just want to read your bio for our listeners, and then we're going to jump right into it. Josh Cox is a recently retired lieutenant commander from the United States Navy and has served for the last 26 years as a Navy SEAL with multiple deployments and hundreds of missions around the world. As an enlisted SEAL operator, Josh started his career at SEAL Team 4, then following 9/11 became a plank owner, which indicates an original member of SEAL Team 10. And in 2008, he was selected for a special officer commissioning program called Seaman to Admiral as one of 5 selected for all naval special warfare. He attended the University of Utah, where he first met Doc, earning a Bachelor of Science in Exercise Sports Science. He was commissioned in 2011 and served as an officer and ground force commander at SEAL Team 2, and then became a plank owner of Special Reconnaissance Team 2. He finished his career as a plank owner and training officer for Naval Special Warfare Group 8, responsible for design, implementation, and execution of pre-deployment training for East Coast-based SEAL teams. And he now consults privately with many organizations, specializing in building high-performing teams through leadership development. Wow.
Amazing.
First, plank owner. Help us understand that. That showed up a few times in your bio. What does that mean?
So this goes back to wooden ship days of the Navy when a vessel was first commissioned. The original members of that ship, the crew, would etch their name into one of the planks on the weather deck as to signify they were original member, and it just kind of stuck with the Navy. And so every time a new command is formed or a new ship is commissioned, there will be the plank owners are the original members assigned to that staff, to that organization when they first start.
Wow.
So total luck of the draw. When I came in, before 9/11 and then through 9/11, a lot of the changes through Naval Special Warfare just happened to be in the right place or the wrong place, right?
Sure.
At the time to be a plank owner of 3 different commands.
Yeah.
So plank owner of 3 different commands, but 4 different SEAL teams, correct?
I've served on actually all 4 of the SEAL teams on the East Coast. So I've done at least a deployment at SEAL Team 2, 4, 8, and 10, and then Special Reconnaissance Team 2. I did 2 deployments there as well.
Gosh, that's amazing. And 26 years as a SEAL.
Yes, ma'am.
That's phenomenal. That's longer than some of our teammates here at ReliaQuest have been alive.
So
right.
45 years old, right? So I've done that longer than I've done anything else on the planet.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Amazing. So recently retired.
Yes.
Right? What are you going to do first? What's next?
Well, do you guys remember maybe in the early 90s, late 80s, when someone won the Super Bowl and they're like, "What are you doing now?" Like, "I'm going to Disney."
Yeah.
So, being a SEAL, you're gone a lot. We have typically 250 training days a year, and we deploy a lot. I've deployed a lot, spent a lot of time away. So I'm a father of 4 children. I have 2 adopted children that are both grown and out of the house now, but 2 young children, biological children, a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. And we've never done like a family vacation. Okay. So we had to go out to California anyway to visit some family, and my wife's like, "Hey, we're going to go to Disneyland."
Absolutely.
So we're like, all right. Now we're able to actually kind of work a surprise for her 2 sisters and their kids to meet up with us. So we had like full family at Disneyland. I had just one day there, but it was awesome. Well, there's a new ride there, And if you haven't been there, I think it's called the Smuggler's Run. It's a Star Wars ride. And I'm a Star Wars guy anyway, but it's not even a ride. It's like a 30-minute experience, okay? You once you get through the line and you go into like a loading dock, and they brief you that you're going to be going up into space, and everybody's in costume, and then you get on the ride, and you feel like you're on like a shipping vessel, and then they tell you you're going to get boarded. Like you're looking out the window, and you can see that there's a big evil Empire vessel, and it's sucking you in with a tractor beam. And then the people that are playing the roles on there are like, hey, everybody be quiet, don't say anything, they're going to board us. And as we get off, the doors open, and the Empire soldiers come in. And my 4-year-old is feral in many ways. She's wild, but she's just now gotten to the point where she's starting to understand that all of her uncles are Navy SEALs. So she's like, if you're a big burly guy with tattoos that look like you may have just gotten out of prison, she's like, you're my guy. Like, I like you. You know what I mean? Because the majority of her uncles are those kind of people, or at least they look like those kind of people. But she's starting to figure out that Navy SEALs hunt down bad guys. And so she's really attached to that.
Oh, no.
So she uses that term a lot. Like, she'll be like, Daddy, you're a Navy SEAL. You got to, and I'm like, okay, hey, calm it down. But so we get boarded by the ship, and they walk you out, and there's all these stormtroopers stood up, and they're taking you down to put you in these cells. It's a whole experience. But she sees these big stormtroopers, and she's like, Daddy, don't kill these bad guys. You'll go to jail. And I'm like, hey. Her name's Kaya. I'm like, Kaya, okay. And she's like...
She's saying it out loud.
Oh, yeah, out loud.
Everyone's
Really loud.
hearing her.
Really loud. And like, as the soldiers are coming up and playing their part, she's like, Daddy, don't kill him. I'm like, let's calm it down. And my 7-year-old, who fully is aware of this, is just like, you guys are embarrassing me as a whole thing, So
yes.
That's my most recent.
Welcome to civilian
life.
life.
Yeah, welcome to civilian life, right? So
that is fantastic.
Yeah.
Out of the mouths of babes.
Good day at Disneyland, but that was a memorable part of the trip.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. And I'm imagining for the stormtroopers as well, and the people dressed up.
Yeah, everybody. I mean,
everyone had a story.
Everyone played
when
it cool.
they went home that night. They had a story to tell their families.
Everybody played it cool. It was cool.
I love it.
I love it, man. Thank you for sharing that. Hey,
yes.
let's talk what it's like to be a part of one of the highest performing teams, highest performing organizations in the world, United States Navy SEALs, right? Like, and we've talked a little bit about this before, about just the standards and what it takes. And so kind of kick us off with why standards are just so important. Like, why standards are so important to elite performance in what you all are able to do.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Now, to start off, like for me, when I first joined the Navy, and my wife jokes about this, a lot of the team guys, as we call Navy SEAL, like we call each other team guys, that she knows that are the highest performing guys, that a lot of my very close friends, it's like, if you look at their background, they usually come from not the best background situation and maybe didn't do the best in school. And it's like, was going to join the military or maybe go to jail or be a ditch digger or, who knows,
sure.
right? Yeah. When I first decided to join the Navy, I graduated from high school with a 1.8 GPA. I didn't have a lot of options, but I grew up always just wanting to be I wanted to be a warrior, a soldier, a commando. And when I did not understand, I'd seen Rambo and like the Navy SEALs movies. My dad, when I would go stay with him, my parents were divorced, but I would always get to like rent an action movie, and he would let me rent whatever action movie I wanted as long as the good guys won, kind of thing. So I watched a lot like Commando, Predator, all these movies long
Classics.
before I should have watched them when I was
let's go.
young. So I didn't even understand what it really took to get in. I just knew I wanted to be a soldier.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I got there and had to take the screening test and started to figure out like, oh, there's a lot. They don't just let anybody come in to even try, let alone the standards and what it takes to get through the program. So when I came in 1997, when I joined, you had to pass a background check, right? You had to take the ASVAB, which is essentially the military's version of the SATs. It's a vocational aptitude test. You have to cut a certain score there. And then you go through boot camp, and you had to volunteer to take a physical screening test. You take that test, you had to pass it, and then make it through boot camp, A school. You go to BUDS, which is where that's the crucible, that's the proving ground there. 6-month course, basic underwater demolition SEAL training. That's where Hell Week is. People have heard of that. And every week there are timed pass-fail evolutions, and the times over the course of the 6 months, you're breaking your body down, but the times get faster at everything. So it's like it's compoundingly harder to make it through. And then once you made it through that, then you had to go to follow-on airborne school, learn how to jump. That's pretty easy. It is pass or fail, but it's really just
relatively
like fall out of a fall out of a plane and stay alive, like not that hard.
Yeah.
But then you go through, when I was a new guy, it was called SEAL tactical training. Now it's called SEAL qualification training, but it's another 4 months of follow-on training to actually learn how to be a SEAL, put on gear and carry a gun and shoot, move, communicate, those things. And then at the end of that, you were a probationary SEAL for a year, just at a SEAL team as a new operator, where you're being evaluated all the time for your like leadership ability, your teamwork, grit, resilience kind of thing. And then at the end of that, if they liked you, you would take an oral board and a written exam called a Trident board to get your Trident to actually become a SEAL. So from the time I joined the Navy till the time I actually got my Trident was about 2 years of just daily being tested and evaluated, right?
Did you actually get scores, like testing and evaluation scores?
Yeah, you
also?
would, yeah.
So you would get those like daily. You would kind of know where you
Not daily,
stood?
no. When I came in, there was a lot less science behind it. So it was a lot more like, you suck less tomorrow. You know what I mean? Right? You know, like there wasn't like, oh, you cut a 7 out of 10. You know,
Right.
it wasn't that kind of a thing. I mean, the physical standards were definitely like, it was 4 miles in under this amount of time. The obstacle course, you have to run the obstacle course in a certain amount of time, swims, and then PTs generally, like you have to be able to do X amount of push-ups and pull-ups and all that kind of stuff. But the abstract part of the standards, which we've gotten a lot better at now because we needed to, it was like, this guy, I don't know, there's something about this guy, I don't know. And so it was very subjective then. It was a gut feeling only, which is important. To have those, subjectivity is important, but now to come in, it's a lot more objective. We've, in the early, mid-2000s, started bringing psychologists in to look at our training and say, hey, how do we better evaluate these guys on like actual character, not just their physical ability? Because as instructors, we'd watch people and be like, that guy sucks.
Yeah.
Well, why does he suck? You know, like, what's he doing? You know, like, he's being selfish. What do you mean by that? Like, oh, he's not helping his buddies out. Like, when he gets a second, he's taking a rest for himself instead of helping his friends or helping the other members of his boat crew, or, you know what I mean? Like, little things like that you can pick up on. And we, over time, started to quantify those things and put them into evaluations so we can actually give people grades on that. Yeah. Does that answer that question? Get it going?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, it gets it going for sure, and which makes me think, like, so you go through the 2 years training, you're on the team, per se, you're a SEAL.
Yep.
Like, I'm assuming the standards don't go away. I mean, right? I mean,
well,
is it like,
so
you tell me.
That's actually one of the bigger issues. I'm just 27 years of retirement, right?
Yeah.
So I've been around for a minute. When I first came in, there's this list of all the things I just told you to become a Navy SEAL. Big list, selection criteria. But the deselection criteria, as far as like standards, once you became a SEAL, they were kind of non-existent. So, but now you got to think, this is 1997, 1999 when I got to SEAL Team 4. We're in between wars, so to speak. And the deselection criteria, or the standards you had to at least adhere to, were like, don't get caught stealing anything and don't get anybody killed. And as long as you did that, like, generally speaking, guys would just kind of be able to be around. And they were able to be around because we weren't juxtaposed against like combat metrics. Like, we're not going into a gunfight every day getting tested for real, right? And so we talk about the good old boy network, where guys would be not the best performers, be out of shape, But it was like, he's a good guy though, man. Like, we'll cut him some slack, you know?
Yeah.
And at the time, that was just the way it was. And I was a new guy, so I'm not going to say anything. I didn't even notice it until I got a couple of deployments under my belt. But then when 9/11 happened, we immediately find ourselves immersed in combat. And that's when we're like, okay, hey, we're going to have to create some standards or adhere to the standards that do exist. Because we had like, the military has the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's the military's bylaws and legal system. And we have that in the teams. We're supposed to, we're in the Navy. We're supposed to adhere to that. But it was pretty loosely followed until after 9/11, where we had to like, okay, we got to get strict with this, because the people that we're sending into the fray, if they're not properly prepared, if we're not holding them to some kind of standards, we're setting ourselves up for failure. Yeah. So then over the course of the wars, now, if you look at it now, the list of criteria and standards to become a SEAL and to stay a SEAL and move up the chain of command and like grow in your career, they're even.
Can I just dig into that a little bit? Because the Navy SEALs are one of the most elite teams, units, groups, whatever you want to call it, on the planet, no doubt about it, yet also one of the most inclusive groups on the planet.
Yeah.
So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I've had this conversation with multiple people where I think that's lost on people, because they think, this is this elite, right. The SEAL teams are elite, and so it's not for everybody kind of a thing. But if you think about it, it's actually one of the most inclusive organizations that there is. And what I mean by that is, you can be a man, you can be a woman, you can be tall, you can be short, you can be skinny, you can be fat, you can be white, black, Hispanic, purple, nobody cares, right? You just have to meet our standards, and our standards are, anybody that's interested can look them up right now and start training, right?
Yeah.
So it's based on standards that are reachable, attainable for anyone, no matter what their physical or mental gifts are. You can work to that. So it's really open to anyone that's willing to push themselves and try really hard.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's applicable in the business world as well, right? So maybe speak to that in terms of how that would relate as far as performance standards. And we meet these performance standards, and if we can work toward those and continue to meet performance standards, we're welcome anyone here. And we want to be inclusive of that, but yet also have high standards for the selection process, but then also maintaining those high standards. And if not, you're kind of deselecting yourself.
Yeah, I think, and I've now being retired, I've consulted with business a bit, and one of the things that I like about ReliaQuest is when we talk about standards. Okay, here's the deal: standard is a standard, meaning it's the same for everyone, right? So I talk a lot about silence is compliance. So if I say, hey, the meeting starts at 9, and someone shows up at 9:05, and I don't say anything to that person, the new standard is you can show up to any meeting 5 minutes late.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I do a lot on leadership development. I'm not saying go up to that person and be like, you're late, you suck.
Right.
Right. Like, that's not leadership. You go to that person. You go to that person like, hey, you were 5 minutes late. What's going on? You okay? Like, car breakdown? Like, what's going on? Right. But you have to address that. You can't allow that, because silence is compliance. Right. Well, it's the same thing with like onboarding at ReliaQuest. One of the things I like about this company is everybody, new hire, whether they've already been in business and they're experienced or first job out of college, goes through onboarding together. It's a full week of training to learn about ReliaQuest, all the cross-functional areas of ReliaQuest and the mindset. Same thing for buds and the SEAL teams. Officers and enlisted go through training together, have the exact same standards. It's one of the only places in any military organization where that is the case. Usually officers and enlisted are separate, and they go through separate, and they're held to separate standards. I think that's a very important thing to get right, that I think ReliaQuest has gotten right. And when I look out in the corporate arena and some of the other organizations I've worked with, they don't do it like that. And so, especially like sports teams that I've worked with, where like the star players they can kind of do whatever they want kind of thing. That doesn't fly on the teams. You could be the dude that just got Osama bin Laden, and you still got to show up on time and do everything the same way every time. or people are going to call you out. Like, it's just not, nobody cares how cool you think you are.
Yeah. I love that. How cool you think you are.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
No Show Dogs is brought to you by ReliaQuest, a global leader in cybersecurity. ReliaQuest helps enterprise cybersecurity teams increase visibility, reduce complexity, and manage risk through its security operations platform, Gray Matter. Powered by decades of experience and streamlined by AI and automation, ReliaQuest exists to make security possible. Learn more at ReliaQuest.com. Josh, you mentioned like rolling out new standards post 9/11. So I think about a leader listening to this right now thinking like, man, yeah, we do need some standards. Like, we haven't really set out the standards yet. And so, like, how was that process? Because I imagine there was some resistance, I would think, maybe pushback. It's like, oh, we've never done this before. Why is this important now? You know, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine. I don't know. But so can you walk us through kind of what that looked like? Because, I mean, change is hard, right? And so when you rolled out those new standards, like, how did you guys do it? How did you battle the resistance? How'd you communicate it? Like, just how'd you guys go through that?
Battle the resistance. Are you going back to the
Yeah,
Star
that's
Wars
the Star Wars.
story? Is
I
that
did.
like-
Holy cow. Wow.
So yeah, how we battle the resistance. Yeah.
Right.
Well, so one of the first things I remember happening was, and I remember when this was, I didn't go, I was on a deployment, but in 2005, so a couple years after 9/11 has happened, the Navy has its core values, okay? Honor, courage, and commitment, the Navy's core values. But the SEAL teams decided we needed our own ethos, like our Navy SEAL ethos. Okay, what are we going to stand for? And they took operators at multiple different levels and took them out to San Clemente Island, which is where we train in California. It's part of BUDS. We have a third phase. You go out there for a month. And they took everybody out there for like 2 weeks, and at all the different levels, and they talked about, like, collaboratively, like, hey, what do we want our ethos to be? What do we want to stand for? There's, over the years, like some Sons of Anarchy, you know, remember that show, like biker gangs, and that became like cool. And so there's a bit of that kind of going on in the teams at the time where we kind of like lost sight of, hey, we're supposed to be the Knights of the Round Table, not like a biker gang kind of thing, you know, like as far as like our ethics and our ethos. And so that group of people came up with this paragraph long kind of poem, really, that's our ethos of like what we stand for. I am that man. At the time, it was only men that could go through, but like, I am that person that is willing to do these things for America, for my fellow soldiers. And that was like the beginning of it. And so it was able to be accepted at the lower levels because lower level guys were involved in the creation of that.
That's good.
Nice.
Right? Because you know, right, like if it comes down from the top brass, and
Right.
we have a saying, like, you know, nothing beats ground truth. And as an older guy, you know, the higher I've gone in rank, I spend the majority of my time doing email warfare, right? And not like pew warfare, right? So when something comes down from the people that do email warfare, sometimes you're like, you know. But when involving everybody at all the levels made it more palpable for everyone to accept. That's the beginning of it. I think that's an important thing to think about.
And then was it hard right away, like hard line of like, hey, this is the new standard. You either hit it or you don't, you're out. Like,
no, it was still took a while for people to, because if you're going to hold somebody to a strict standard that you just created right now, right? And if they are unable to meet that standard, it changes the course of their life forever, right? Like, you're no longer able to be a SEAL, you're gone.
Yeah.
I think, and as a leader myself, like, you want to be cautious with those decisions, you know?
Sure.
And so there was definitely some leeway given at the beginning of creating some of these new standards.
And then there's development probably in there, right? Where
There
it's like,
was,
here's the standard, you're not
Right.
meeting it, so like we're going to give you some sort of development opportunity to get there.
And I've now seen where, like, a young guy, I've seen this happen multiple times as the training officer, where I'm observing people going through training. And this is, you've already become a SEAL and you're just training to go on deployment, right? So, like, for another thing that we had an issue with standards in the SEAL teams was making a clear delineation between being tested and being trained. Okay.
Okay.
So like you join the Navy, you want to be a Navy SEAL, you're being tested for that whole 2-year period before I got my trident. I'm being tested every day. Okay. Well, once you get your trident, yeah, you're still being tested. We still want to push you a little bit, but hey, you're on board. Welcome. You're a part of this now. Now we're training you. Because when you're being tested, and you think about any time you've been tested, you're not trying to like excel. You're just trying to pass.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're just trying to get through. So we call it the gray man in BUDS, where a guy's not trying to look at, he doesn't want the instructors to know his name. Like perfect scenario, it's on graduation day. Someone walks across the stage and the instructor's like, who's that guy? You know, like because you haven't gotten any extra attention or anything,
Right.
you know?
Yep.
But once you graduate, now we're being trained. Now we want you to take steps, try new things, make mistakes, because that's how you get better. You know, like that fine line between success and failure where you're pushing yourself just to your limits. Yeah. Well, we want you to do that. So we have to draw those lines. But when you're in that space of now we're being trained, the process of figuring out like, okay, that looks like a failure to me. How many failures before it's time to remove a guy, right? And as the trade at OIC, many times these younger guys, their processing speed just wasn't there. And that's one of the things that helps, like the two things I've seen that make SEALs the best SEALs is emotional regulation and processing speed. Being able to walk into a room or a scenario and process what's going on and make a decision very quickly, and then being able to control your emotions. But so young men, I was 20 when I got to my first SEAL team. I was definitely not good at either of those things. You know, like it took me a lot of falling down and failure to get to the point where I'm now to have some of these things figured out. But we would remove a guy because he's not meeting the standards from the SEAL team he's at and just have him start over with a different SEAL team. Because sometimes just a new, like, you know, new department, new group of people, fresh start, right?
Yeah.
Could be the only change that's necessary. But it took us some time to figure out and create kind of those processes for like, when is it time to pull someone? When is it, okay, we're going to give them one more shot. You know, let's move them to a different group.
So a little bit of trial and error.
Oh, 100%.
Trying to figure that out. And I feel like that's a pretty common thing in the civilian world. But what are the stakes of that on a SEAL team where then you're sending some of these guys off on deployment who maybe you haven't quite figured out yet?
Yep. That's happened.
Yeah. Can you talk through that? I mean, because I'm sure you've made some mistakes during that process and maybe sent some guys who maybe weren't quite ready to go on deployment or needed a little bit more training. And then how did that impact, you know, team chemistry and performance and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. And I didn't say this at the beginning, but you know, I'm retired now. I no longer represent Naval Special Warfare, right? I did it for a long time. So everything I'm talking about they're my opinions and beliefs. They're opinions and beliefs that I've gathered over a long career and opinions and beliefs that I definitely share with many of my peers. And when I say we, I'm talking about Naval Special Warfare, okay? We've given people the benefit of the doubt many times and been proven right and been proven wrong, you know? Like we always say that our SOPs, standard operating procedures, pretty much every one of them is a lesson learned in blood. We've gone out and a mistake has happened and we've been like, okay, let's unpack that. Let's do an AAR after action review, unpack this, and then let's create a SOP so that doesn't happen again, right? And that's why I say, like, the war's kicked off, we start deploying, and that's how we kind of figured that out, that we're like, whoa, that guy wasn't ready. Why wasn't he ready? What happened there? And let's fix this so it doesn't happen again.
So reflecting on that experience, right? We say all the time, experience isn't the best teacher. Reflecting on experience is the best teacher. So reflecting on those moments to make sure it didn't happen again. I think that's a really powerful point for a lot of our listeners, you know, business leaders and entrepreneurs who are trying to figure it out and making a lot of mistakes along the way. Unfortunately, they don't have to learn it through blood, right? The stakes aren't quite as high, but yet certainly something, a principle they can use.
Because I like consult in business now, I think about, because I always have people tell me that, like, well, our stakes aren't as high because lives aren't on the line. And I do push back on that a little bit because it's people's livelihoods, you know, like that's still important. There's a difference between climbing over a wall with a gun in Afghanistan than showing up to work here today, for sure.
Sure.
Right?
I
But
wouldn't know. Would you?
I can just imagine.
I'm imagining, yeah.
As someone who's done both, I'll tell you it's a bit different.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Fair.
okay, thanks.
But like it's still still important because people's livelihoods are on the
Right,
line, and,
right.
and for anyone that's leading humans, right, and those humans are in your employ, it's important to get it right.
Yeah, I think that's a powerful message for people to hear. I hope everyone really does pay attention to that, because most people are not going to be climbing over that wall with a gun in Afghanistan, but yet what they are experiencing in the workplace does matter to them to a high degree. And it is their life and their livelihood, and it does have that significance and relevance to them.
Also, like another thing that's important to think about when you think about standards is, I believe this standards equal freedom. Right. So once I became a lieutenant commander, I moved up to that next echelon of leadership. I did two troop commander tours. And as a training officer, I would provide everyone that was a subordinate of mine with a list of essentially like my rules of the road, like Josh Cox's 12 rules of the road. But it's essentially commander's guidance. So I'm a commander. It's my guidance to my subordinates of, if you work with me, these are my expectations. Okay, so I'm providing them with my own standards of just these aren't big like honor, courage, and commitment, core value, big picture things. These are the day-to-day what I expect from you if we're going to work together. All right. And
can you share a few of them with us?
Yep, sure, I can. But so with those standards, I would sit down with everyone, go over them all, and make everybody sign and date like we're all agreeing that these are fair standards. I'm going to sign one too, because I expect you guys to hold me. I will hold myself, and you'll hold me to the same standards as well, which is something we shy away from in the military. Like anytime anybody's getting paperwork, a counseling, it's like super negative connotations go along with that, right? Because you feel like it could be weaponized down the road or whatever.
Right.
But I always try to explain it like, no, this document here, these standards equal freedom. Because you get to a place that has no standards, you're not sure who to go to with a problem, or when you're actually supposed to be here, or when you're supposed to leave, allowed to leave, what you're supposed to wear, where you eat lunch, where you're creating a situation for chaos. You know what I mean? Yeah. But by creating those standards, having like the yellow and the white lines on the highway, you're giving people a leeway to just, as long as you're within those, the mustard and the mayonnaise, you're good. You know what I mean?
The mustard and the mayonnaise.
So that actually,
well,
the lines on the highway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just
never heard it put that way.
Yeah. Is that like a Navy SEAL thing? Is that what? Okay.
A Josh thing, I guess.
Yeah, Josh thing. All right.
But so I will tell you some of my standards, and they're not original to me. I'm a copycat. So through my career, the things that stood out from the best guys I ever worked with. So these are printed and on the wall outside of the office everywhere I've worked in the SEAL teams. And it's always be in the right place at the right time with the right equipment and the right attitude. Never arrived, like stay humble, okay? You never arrived, you never made it. You have to earn your trident every day. Always improve your fighting position. So from your foxhole to your workspace to your continued education in the profession of arms, always improve your fighting position, and always have a knife.
Interesting. You know what, those, I think, although those are very relevant to the SEAL teams, we can translate that into business as well, right? Make sure that first one, just make sure you're ready. Make sure you're prepared for that meeting. You go in with what you need. Don't be the person walking in not knowing what's happening, right? Making sure you're ready for any scenario, bringing the right attitude, the right equipment. I mean, all of those things I think can be applicable.
None of them really require talent.
Good point.
You know?
Yeah.
Like you just have to, all they require is for you to care.
Interesting.
That's true.
Yeah.
And you can't teach care though. That's right.
Yeah.
I mean that's the thing though.
Yeah.
So, but that's why but that's the separator, right?
It is.
Also,
Right.
that's
right.
why care is a separator. Yeah. I know we're getting kind of towards the end of it, but I want to talk a little bit about after action reviews and how important they are, because I think it's probably what you learn there is ultimately that leads to your standards, right? And it's like I think about businesses maybe run too fast. They're so concerned about the next thing that they never really learn from the last thing. And then when they get to standard development, it's like, well, what are we going to do? I don't know. We didn't take the time to really learn. We're just kind of going, you know? And so with that being said, like, just talk a little bit about like what goes into the after action review, like what's required. I think about your rules, like the after action review. I'm sure right attitude is essential because those are probably hard conversations at times.
They can be very hard.
Yeah. So just talk to us a little bit about the importance of those and kind of what that looked like at your level.
Yeah. So in the business world, I've heard AARs referred to as postmortems.
Okay.
Which just sounds terrible. I don't
That
know why
does sound
people call it like
terrible.
that. Just, you know.
I feel like that's more applicable
so I think
for your world.
words
for the
matter, you know.
seals.
So like after action review, we go out and perform an action. Right after that action,
Yeah.
we're going to review what happened. In the SEAL teams, there's, like I said before, roughly 250 days of training a year. That means we're doing 250 AARs. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that that's 250. Make a PowerPoint, get everybody in the room in uniform, and go down an hour-long diatribe on the, you know, like a 25-slide thing, right? But at the end of every day, we're going to sit down and go, hey, this is what we did today. What went right? What went wrong? Right?
Yeah.
And typically the flow for an AAR is item discussion recommendation. That's kind of typically how we do it. So what's the item that we want to discuss? Because sometimes it's a piece of equipment. Sometimes it's a call that was made or, you know, an error that occurred. Sometimes it's a good thing, right? Like, hey, we went left on this op and that worked out flawlessly. Do we want to make that an SOP that if we get in this situation, we always go left? You know?
Yeah.
So we take the time to do that, and we typically try to stick to like the three things rule, you know? I can only really remember like 3 things, maybe 4 things.
Yeah,
so
sure.
if we go into an AAR and you're like, we're going to talk up in depth about these 15 points of performance, you're like,
no
you
way.
lost me already.
Yeah.
Like I'm already
Yeah.
doggone, I'm done.
Yeah.
And so we'll typically pick the big 3, talk through them, and then the most important part of AARs is they lead to the creation of SOPs, standard operating procedures, right? That's what's important to us, but not just the creation of the SOPs, because if you just create an SOP, like, okay, hey guys, we went left here and that worked out awesome. New SOP, if we get in the situation, we're going left here every time, and here's the hand and arm signal for it, here's the call on the radio for it, cool, and we never talk about it again until the next time we got in that situation, we're probably gonna be like, did we go left? What was the hand arm? What's the call I'm supposed to make? Like, so the more important part of those AARs is then taking what we've learned or what we discuss and agree on and going and rehearsing that. Because if you don't rehearse it, that's how you build resilience, right? You build resilience through repetition. You have to repeat things over time. So it becomes where you, like the no-look confidence, David, it's that, where you develop that unconscious control of being able to do that. And so, yes, AARs are important, and that's the process we use, item discussion recommendation. But the most important thing is whatever comes out of that AAR has to be rehearsed so that everybody across functions in the organization, across roles in a SEAL platoon, everybody understands it and they know their role and what they're supposed to do because we've rehearsed it multiple times.
Gotcha. And then what crushes in AAR? Like what are the things that when this shows up, you know that's not going to be a good after action review?
Oh, well, anytime anybody gets hurt, like I said, most of our lessons learned and SOPs are written in blood. Yeah. Another thing too that we do, and I think this starts with at the beginning of BUDS, everyone goes through the exact same training. So everyone's like, hey, you may outrank me, but we're peers. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like we all went through this together to become Navy SEALs. So we're peers leading peers. Okay. Yeah. And so it's from day one, it's like when it's time to do an AAR, it's kind of rank off as long as you're respectful. But I've been in plenty of AARs after real world missions overseas where the highest ranking person in the room is getting called out, like, don't ever do that again. You know, this is what you did that was effed up, and let's talk about it because you can't do that anymore. And that's just the way it is.
So just humility, right?
Yeah. And it's bred in from day one, but then it's nurtured that you have to be humble. That's why it's one of my rules, right? Like you never arrive, you're not cool. You got to earn it every day. Yeah. As soon as you start to believe that you are too cool, it's typically when you're setting yourself up for a fall.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that's true in the real world.
Yeah,
too,
it's true for everybody,
world.
really.
Yeah.
But that's the important thing of the AARs is creating SOPs and then rehearsing those things to make sure everybody knows what it is.
Yeah. I know we're running up against, I got one more question and then final
go.
question.
Yeah.
Cool. So obviously your bio that we read is nothing compared to what you've actually done. I mean, that was just such a small portion. Sure. 26 years, so many missions. You have risen to the ranks of leadership in a lot of those teams that you've been on. And I'm thinking about, 26 years of experience is nothing to scoff at. That's pretty significant. Now being retired into the civilian world, here we go, right? Starting a whole new life, basically. Yeah. And I'm thinking about those of us who will never experience what you have experienced, which is pretty much most people who are listening to this podcast. What advice would you give if you had just one piece of advice for people to become elite at whatever it is that they're doing? So whatever their performances are, whether it's a business leader, an entrepreneur, or maybe they're just getting started in business, or maybe they're parents who just want to be the best parents they can be. Whatever it is that you're driving toward, what's the one piece of advice that you would give people to become elite in their performance?
I would say reflection. And I used to say regularly, like, experience is the one thing money can't buy. And I used to put a ton of emphasis on experience, just for experience's sake. It wasn't until I got my master's degree in strategic leadership, and one of the papers I had to write for that was about like some of the bigger lessons I've learned in my career. And reflection now, I realize, is so important, and it was never important to me when I was younger. So I made a lot of mistakes. I've had an excellent career and been very lucky, but I've fallen forward. Like, everybody falls, everybody fails, but I've fallen forward many times and backward. But I was always in it. I never took as many pictures as I probably should have, because I'm like, I'm here. I'll always have it in my head. And after an op, or after a day of training, or a block of training, or a deployment cycle, I didn't spend the appropriate amount of time to reflect on what I'd gone through. So like, I left a lot of lessons on the table that I could have learned much sooner in my life if I had actually taken the time to reflect on my experience. So now I agree with what you guys say with, experience isn't important. It's reflecting on your experience is what makes that experience valuable. And I think as a parent, and I'm, like I said, I'm a father of 4 children, and I'm a father of 11 chickens and 2 ducks and 3 dogs and 2 cats. But so like
Josh Cox,
yeah, right, yeah. In strong negotiations to potentially get a goat soon.
Oh boy!
But so like I spend a lot more time now reflecting, even as a parent. Like, if I have a bad interaction with my kid, like, I got to remember that's a kid. I'm a grown up. I got to, like, I didn't take time to think about any of those things before. And I think that if you're pursuing mastery at anything, taking the time to actually reflect on parts of that journey will help you get there sooner.
Amazing. What a great answer.
Yeah, man, it's so good. Well, let's just kind of get to the final question, right? I mean, it's the same question that we ask everyone. I know you touched on it a little bit there, reflection, but you said you didn't do that a lot early in your career, right? And so now reflecting on your military career, right?
Well done.
Yes, thank you. Reflecting on that, though, what would you say were some of the things that you were willing to do that others weren't, that has allowed you to have the success you've had in your military career?
I will say that the best SEALs that I've ever worked with, the guys that I wanted to emulate and be like, they absolutely loved the job and the work. And I've always been that too. So like, I was able to find joy and love in everything that we were doing, especially, and it's a weird twisted thing that's any SEAL knows, it's like you find more joy and love in the crappier parts. Like when times are really down and things are not going well, is when like you find yourself the most elated and joy. You're like, well, this sucks, kind of thing. And so I think one of the things that I'm known to have been good at is loving the job and keeping things positive. Because obviously, like, I've been to 64 funerals, and I've been in a lot of situations where things didn't go well. So a lot of opportunity to have a negative mindset, right? but always trying to keep things positive and having a growth mindset and just being positive and like, hey, everything's going to be fine. Let's make jokes. Let's keep it light, is something that I've seen other guys in my line of work that they weren't able to do it that way. They weren't able to find that kind of like happiness in all the things, all the parts of the job. So that's something I think that just keeping the right mindset and staying positive no matter what the circumstance is.
Amazing.
So good.
Yeah.
So good. And the cool thing is, and here's what I'm most excited to kind of wrap up with is for our listeners to know this, is that Josh actually started here at ReliaQuest in March through a special operations fellowship program. And he's now a permanent member of our mental performance team, which is really cool. Yeah. So for the listeners out there that are like, I wish we could get more, good news. We'll be having Josh coming back. So
that's right.
And if you didn't like it, bad news.
Get over it. No. Yeah, right.
You can reflect on why.
Yeah.
And then maybe better
get
yourself.
Better. Yeah, get better.
Right.
And
That's
we're
right.
going to get better. Man, we are fired up that you're here.
Yes.
Just to let you know, you're going to make us all better.
Yep.
And we're just grateful that you're willing to join this team and push us to be, better than we even think we can be. So we're glad.
Yeah,
glad
and
you're
thank you for 26 years of selfless service to our country and helping keep all of us safe so that we can keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you for that
Cool.
as well.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, go out and make it a great today.
Yeah, absolutely.